You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. And now, it's time for the show that breaks down the options market from unusual activity alerts to market analysis, strategy overviews, listener questions, and much more. If it involves puts and calls, then our all-star panel will break it down. It's time to hit the Option Block with your host, Mark Longo from the Options Insider Media Group, and co-hosts, Uncle Mike TOSAW from St. Charles Wealth Management, along with Mark the Greasy Meatball Sebastian and Andrew the Rock Lobster Giovinazzi from OptionPit.com. And now, get ready to hit the Option Block.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again to commence our broadcast week here on the old Options Insider Radio Network. Time once again for the Option Block. My name, of course, Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever-exciting, at least we tend to think so, Options Insider Radio Network. Reminding all of you out there, if you like what you hear, clearly a lot of you do, looking at the numbers, you folks are enjoying the shows. Keep rating and reviewing on your platform of choice. It does help all the new folks who are continuing to discover these markets. As a result, discover the content. You can leave those reviews anywhere, pretty much any major outlet that carries our shows. Of course, the app stores for all of our apps, wherever you get our content, you can leave those ratings and reviews. And then, of course, if you want to go above and beyond, you say, I'd like to have some exclusive content beyond just what the network brings me, including great pro Q&As. Got our buddy, Mr. Tony Saliba, coming back in the hot seat to answer all of your questions tomorrow. Got, of course, options oddities at the end of the week, live action and access to everything we do here throughout the week. Great giveaways. I see you folks trying to buy those pro trading crates. Alas, they are not for sale. They're only available to our pro members. Where do you go to get all that info and to dive in on the dark side journey? Theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go. For you cool kids /secret club. Let us commence operations this week the way we always do. It is time to go back to the halcyon days of the 80s. Hair was big. Laces were puffy, cars were DeLoreans, and also wrestling was running wild with the imagination out there. And so we like to kick off our week here, seeing if you could guess these 80s wrestlers via their entrance music. Today's music is a bit of a twofer. It's a little bit different for each, but effectively it's the same song. So we're going to use it in the tag team context. I want you to guess the name of this tag team. But it is also essentially the entrance music for one of the great 80s wrestlers of all time as well. They kind of just took his music and stuck it on the tag team when he was in it. So, but technically this is the tag team. So right now we are looking for the name of the 80s tag team. Of course, if you get the tag team, you're also going to know the name of the wrestler too. So here we go. Can you name this 80s wrestling iconic tag team? Nothing yet? Nothing floating your bloat?
I've got some ideas. I do too. It would be a guess at best.
All right, tell you what, since you're both grasping at straw, I'll let you. I'll let you both guess first and see if anybody gets it. We'll go there. So who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
All right, go for it.
Is it the Hart Foundation?
Yes, the Hart Foundation, the Pink and Black Attack. I was about to say that, but that would have given it away. Yes, that is the Hart Foundation. Also, the music,
the Hitman and Jim the Anvil Neidhart.
Yes, also the music for Brett the Hitman. They didn't change it really at all.
Yeah, that was why. Although Hitman's more of a '90s guy than an '80s guy, isn't he?
He started in the '80s. The Hart Foundation was in the
Hart
80s.
Foundation was big in the '80s.
Hart Foundation is '80s, but Hitman as himself is '90s.
I remember him being big in the '80s because I remember arguing at the time in like grade school with a lot of the girls in my grade school because they all like Bret Hart, and I was like, "You're not real wrestling fans. You just like Bret Hart. You think he's cute." It was a big fight between the boys and the girls because they weren't real wrestling fans.
Well, the Montreal Screwjob was in...
That was later, yeah. All that stuff came
98.
later.
Like
yeah.
97, right?
That came later.
97 or 98, I believe.
That was all him and HBK and all that stuff. Yes, that's kind of like the second iteration of him. But yeah, he started off as the Hitman and then, of course, as the Pink and Black Attack, which became the Hart Foundation as we start off the show with the trading block.
It's time to break down the latest topics, trades, and trends in the world of options. It's time for the Trading Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Trading Block. This is indeed the portion of the show where we break down what the heck is trading out there, listeners. And it's another one of those day starts off in one direction, seems like it's going to turn around in the other direction, and it does for a brief period, and then it turns back around again. So we got some modest whipsaw action, not quite as aggressive, obviously, as we saw a couple of weeks ago, which were extremely tumultuous whipsaws. Today, not so much, but still impressive. Even though, so right now we are green, listeners. The S&P up about 0.9%. The Dow up over 1%, about 1.1%. NASDAQ up about 0.5%. And of course, all this whipsawing really is kind of keeping us locked in place from a vol perspective. When we kicked off the show, as VIX was at about a 30-35, so north of the 30 handle, but also pretty much literally unched from Thursday's show. A VVIX 87 also unched from where it was on Thursday's show. VXX, when we kicked off the show, 20.25, also unched. Stop me if you heard this before, listeners. UVXY was at about a 12.10, also unched from last show. SVIX, 10.65, up a whopping 0.15, so that one had a little bit of movement. UVIX, 12.80 when we kicked off the show, up about a tenth of a point. And VolQ, 34.25, also unched. So a whole heck of a lot of unched, at least from a vol perspective. Let's go out to the winner of this week's Guess That 80s Wrestler, a.k.a. the greasiest of Meatball. Mr. Meatball, sir, any enduring memories of the Hart Foundation, sir, a.k.a. the Pink and Black Attack? And then B, what's lighting up your tape in today's markets?
Yeah, they had some good feuds as a tag team. I'm trying to remember some of their bigger feuds. That they had off the top of my head.
I was always a demolition guy, but the Pink and Black Attack, clearly a number 2 for me. I like that. I was more of a Jim the Anvil guy. I like Jim the Anvil.
I'm trying to remember who they had their big, huge feud with. Was it the Powers of Pain?
Everybody fought the Powers of Pain. They were like universal tag team heels, right?
Yes, they were. And I want to say they had some pretty good matches with kind of all the heels that they had. The Quebecers, the maybe the natural disasters. Some of those teams, I think they had some really good feuds with. Those guys were absolute pros. So was a big fan of those dudes, and I think that they're going to be that. I'm surprised that as a group isn't in the Hall of Fame yet. Especially with the passing of our good friend Jim the Anvil Neidhart, and
I think the Hart Foundation is. I think the Hart Foundation is.
Oh, they are.
Yes.
Okay,
because they were. Brett was accepting the award a couple years ago when he got attacked.
Oh,
Do you remember that when he was giving a speech and some guy attacked him in the middle of it in front of all these wrestlers who immediately attacked that guy because you're attacking Bret Hart. What are you doing in front of a bunch of wrestlers? So they all went nuts on the guy.
Not a great idea.
Not a smart idea, no. Yeah, I forgot.
A lot of people don't know this, but wrestlers are actually very strong.
And also, they all love Bret Hart, right? So if you're going to attack this guy in front of all of them, that was probably a bad move. Yes, so I think it was some indie wrestler trying to make his name, and I think it backfired.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress, sir. What else is catching your eye today?
You talked about the turnaround. It's really weird given, when we've been at the highs, ball has been rallying and VIX is up mostly weekend effect. But if you look at strike volatility in November for SPX options, it's just going up and up since Friday. And showing you that traders are using this kind of 2-day rally as an opportunity to put on hedges or sell stock and buy calls. The Russell 2000 basically flat. The big leader for the day, which is a little unusual, is the Dow Jones. That's kind of the strong index of all of them. And the NASDAQ is a little soft. Underneath all of this bullish action, ARK Funds was down almost 4% at one point. And, kind of the across the board, things look a little weird. And notably, I think the big thing you got to look at is China. Holy dumpster fire. FXI is down over 10%. Alibaba is now trading $61.70. It's down 15% today. EVs are getting punched in the face. NIO's down almost 20%. But Tesla, which is lowering its price of cars in China, is down 3.5%. So underneath what looks like a pretty bullish day, there's some underlying ugliness. And I'm very interested to see how long this rally can last. And whether we end up giving it up as the day progresses, right? We're either going to, I think, turn around, or maybe we go and kiss 3,800.
Kiss it. Perhaps we shall. We shall see. We kind of flirted with it earlier this morning. We shall see if we get there for a proper kiss later on in the session. Mr. Uncle Mike, sir, same question for you. What are your enduring memories of the pink and black attack, and what is lighting up your tape in so far, at least, an Uncle Mike type of day?
I always had good memories of them. They were kind of like heels that people kind of liked anyway. In the early days, we got to give credit to one of the greatest managers ever, second greatest manager of all time, Jimmy Hart. He was a big part of the Hart Foundation, obviously. And in case you're wondering, Bobby the Brain Heenan is the greatest wrestling manager of all time. Jimmy Hart is number 2 in my opinion, and then followed by number 3, of course, Slick, the Doctor of Styles himself. But I think with the Hart Foundation, I was always, being a big redheaded guy myself, I was definitely a fan of Jim the Anvil Neidhart. I never could quite grow the goatee like he did, but maybe one of these years I'll do it. But actually, I probably won't. I want to stay married. I don't know if my wife would probably kill me if I did something like that, or at least shave it off in the middle of the night, one of the two. But yeah, good memories of the Hart Foundation for sure. In terms of these markets, 3,800 is a key level right now, in my opinion, in that when we rallied a couple of weeks ago around the 3807 from what I'm seeing is the high of where we got to a couple of weeks ago in early October, and then it just went right back down. So we're testing those levels again. Now, the other part of this is that we had support around the 3,800 level back in May, just briefly. Then it rallied and then it broke that support. And then before that, just in looking at the S&P 500, we kind of had a little bit of support there in the initial stages of the rally back in February of 2021. So 3,800 is a key level, I think. It's not a major key level, but it's definitely a minor key level from where we could be. It is a big number. And on top of that, we have rallied quite a bit recently from the lows of roughly the low that we had in the 3,500 level on October 13th, or 3,491. And so we've come quite a ways since the lows. And if we hit the 3,800 level or above it, that could be close to a 10% rally in a couple of weeks. So, yes, I know it's coming off of a low, but understand that just keep your poise, traders. That's kind of my thought behind where you need to be with this. Bonds are flat today. They continue to sell off on Friday. And so from there, I think it's just still a lot of the fear. I think pretty much anyone would agree with me, just fear of rising interest rates with where we are. So we have that's happening. My beloved silver is flat on the day as well. So we have some things happening there along those lines. I'm sorry, not a lot happening there, I should say. With the oil is down slightly on the day. So we're not getting a large amount of major movers and shakers, so to speak, in the sector area either. So, I mean, healthcare has a little bit of a rally, but aside from that, nothing major is happening today. So whenever we've been having, I guess what always concerns me is that whenever we've been having major market moves, and then now we're not really having a major market move, that makes me concerned of a major market move about to happen one way or another. So I'm short-term cautious at this point in time.
Uncle Mike, short-term cautious, as always. Let's see if the market is short-term cautious or if they're just having a party here with all this whipsaw action. And VIX is doing some paper, 221,000. A month and change ago, this would have looked a lot more impressive than it does today. The ADV now is closing in on 700,000, 671,000, up about another 7 or 8,000 just since our last show. So it was below 400,000 not too long ago, listeners. So we already would have been pretty much halfway to our ADV at this point. Today, not so much, but still interesting stuff. 221 doesn't seem like we're going to hit that 671. But then again, the day is young. We could have another whipsaw in us or another big move. Either way, that could drive some paper. SPY looking pretty robust. 6 million contracts pretty much even on the tape right now. That's a good way towards its ADV, listeners. Where ADV is just over 9 million right now, 9.06 million. So a SPY well on its way to another impressive total. The S looking pretty robust as well, 1.53 million. Again, this would have been a banger of a day as well not too long ago. Now we kind of almost expect this. Used to be the barometer was 1 million contracts by this time of the day, and the S was rock'em sock'em paper. Now it's up to 1.5 million because the ADV is north of 3 million now, 3.01 million. That's insane. The S putting up some numbers these days. Small caps, about 400,000 contracts on the tape. The ADV also closing in on 1 million out there, 981,000. And the Qs, 1 3/4 million contracts on the tape right now. The ADV just a tick under 3 million, about 2.9 million. Let's get out to the micro side, see what's going on. We are, of course, in the middle of earnings season, listeners. That tends to drive a little bit of paper, and we're starting to see that now. 266,000 contracts. That's what it cost you to break into the top 10 today. That gets you to our old friend. This is usually our number 4, number 5, maybe number 6 name, hanging out in the chip zone, which is NVIDIA. Today it's number 10. That shows you what's going on. It's earnings season. New names are piling in there today. NVIDIA all the way down at number 10. Still good for 266,000 contracts, though. NVIDIA kind of unched on the day right now, 124 and about 2/3. It's had a range of about 125.5 and a low of 120 almost in a half. So it's had quite the range today. Almost a $5 range, but kind of hanging out literally unched right now, which is interesting, but good enough for closing in on 300,000 contracts. Number 9, AMD. So both of our chip names, 10 and 9. I can't remember the last time we've seen that, if at all, that both of them have been still in the top 10, but right at the bottom. That's kind of interesting. AMD good for 292,000 contracts right now. 58.18 is where it's hanging off about 2/3 of a buck. This one's had a high of nearly $59, 58.87 and a low of 56.66. So not quite as impressive of a range as our friend NVIDIA there, but still some numbers, and it's still good for almost 300,000 contracts on the tape. Number 8, Amazon. Again, this kind of shows you how topsy-turvy the list is today. Amazon usually hanging out near the top of the list at number 3. Today, number 8, 302,000 contracts for the Amazonians. Let's see where they're hanging out right now. 118 and about 3/4, off about 60 cents. Their high for the day was 120, almost in a half, but 120.40, and the low was 116 and about a half. Number 7, we've got NEO. So kind of hitting on all of the Meatball's favorite themes today. China and EVs, all in one name. NEO, 395,000. So we're at number 7, listeners. We're already closing in on 400K. So this is a pretty robust day, all things considered. NEO 9.25 right now, off nearly $2 or nearly 18%. The low for the day was 8.38, so they bounced nearly $1 from that low, but still they're taking it on the chin out there today, as a lot of Chinese and EV names are taking a hit today. So they cross both of those sectors. They are the Venn diagram of the two of those areas, so they're feeling the heat today. Number 6, it's Meta. You know, they're pretty much hanging out in the top 10 somewhere. Today it's number 6. Good for 414,000 contracts. They're actually lifting up 2.25, trading 132.25. The low on the day was 124.5, and the high was 133 and about a half. My goodness. So they've had quite the range as well, about $9. So Meta whipsawing its way to 414,000 contracts. Number 5 today, good for 426,000 contracts. I haven't seen this name in the top 10 in quite some time. It's our old friend Pabst Blue Ribbon, a.k.a. Petrobras, ticker symbol PBR, of course. A 14 1/3. Somehow that joke never gets old. Let's see, off about $1.70 or 10.5%. Today, they only had about a $1.10 range. So they're putting up some numbers out there today. I'm guessing it's one of these funky, massive spreads that takes up all the oxygen in the room. These tend to go up out here sometimes. Looks like we got a NOV 14, 13, 12. It's all opening. It's not a fly, though, because it's all 1-to-1. Each doing 100,000 contracts on the put side. So that's your 300,000 right there. Interesting. It's not a fly, though. It's just a straight 1-to-1-to-1. It's like buying the 14, selling the 13 puts, and then maybe selling the 12s as well. So funky, a little bit of funkiness out there. But either way, 300,000 contracts going up in that one kind of funky trade for good old Pabst Blue Ribbon. Number 4, going back to China, it's BABA. 512,000 contracts on the tape for them. They're off 10.60 today, or nearly 15%, trading right around 61.5. On the day, they've had about almost exactly a $6 range, $58 on the dark side, 64.10 on the upside, obviously halfway in the middle of that right now. So a rough day for good old Alibaba. Good for 535,000 contracts. Number 2 is another one that folks, actually, I'll take it back. Number 3, we're going to first, but it surprised me that it was in that spot. I immediately assumed it was number 2, but it was not. It is number 3. It is Apple. When's the last time we saw Apple at number 3, listeners? It's been quite some time. 535,000 contracts. Apple up about $0.75, hanging out right around 148 right now. It's had a $2.82 range on the day. Got down as low as 146, as high as 148.82. So they had a little bit of a range out there. Not a lot of paper, though. Only 535,000 contracts. Apple can do that on a half day. I mean, the Apple can do that easily. So that's not a lot of paper for Apple. And then number 2, eclipsing the fruit company today, is a name that's come under a lot of fire of late. This is Snap, trading $8.50 right now, up about $0.75, or nearly 10%. On the day, they've had about $1 range, $7.49 the low side, and then up to $8.56, so $1.07 on the upside there for good old Snap, and hanging out pretty close to the upside of that range. And again, good for 908,000 contracts. I have a feeling we'll be coming back to Snap in a few minutes, so let's table that one from now. Instead, let's go out to the top spot out there, listeners. You know what it is by now. You don't need me to tell you. It's Tesla. 1.36 million contracts on the tape, trading right around 206 2/3 right now, off nearly $8 on the day, or almost 4%. Let's see, on the day, they've gotten as low as about 198.5 and as high as 207.70. So they've done some living out there today as well. And again, good for 1.36 million. And if you want to know what's going on from an earnings perspective, luckily for you, we have all the updated earnings move results, earnings season, and earnings trades reports hot off the presses, courtesy of our friends over there in Orat's land. Let's look what's popping off this week. It's a hot and heavy week, listeners, this week. We got Discover Card today. Then tomorrow, we've got Coca-Cola, GE, and GM, and 3M, and good old Softy, and Alphabet, and Visa, and Chipotle, and Spotify. And then Wednesday, we've got Boeing, Bristol Myers, Kraft Heinz, Hilton, Harley-Davidson, good old Wingstop, Meta, and Ford. And then Thursday, we got Mickey D's. See, they're talking about bringing back the McRib for the final time. What's that nonsense? We'll get to that. Caterpillar on Thursday, Southwest Airlines, MasterCard, Apple, you may have heard of them, Amazon, Intel, and T-Mobile Friday, Exxon, and Chevron. What are you doing, Mickey D's, threatening me with the end of the McRib? How dare you? But let's go out to, we have our updated earnings move results reports. I'm looking here for any interesting tickers that are popping off right before the bell today, listeners. Unless you're into Schnitzner Steel Industries. I don't see a ton of them here that are popping off before the bell today. Later this week, we have obviously a legion of them. Let's go through a couple of them right now. Let's go to GE. They are tomorrow before the bell. 72 and about 80 cents is where they were trading as of this report. They're pricing in $4.16. In the past, they moved $3.73. So a little bit extra juice out there. Let's go. Man, so many names popping off this week. We could just do a whole show just on it. Alphabet, tomorrow after the bell, 101.13 is where they were trading. They're pricing in $6.14. In the past, they've moved $4.88. So a fair amount of extra juice in Alphabet. Softy, tomorrow after the bell as well. 242.12 is where they were trading. They're pricing in almost $12. And in the past, they've moved about $7.50. So that's a fair amount of extra juice for Softy as well. Maybe some of these lingering questions over the Activision deal will it get approved. Maybe some of that feeding in there. We shall see. Spotify, aka the Rogan Ball. Let's see what's going on with Rogan Ball. 25th after the bell, 88.70 is where they were trading. They're pricing in $9.70. In the past, they've moved $8.38. So fair amount of extra juice out there in Spotify. So many listeners. Let's go to Ford. 26 after the bell. 12.19 is where they were trading as of this report. They're pricing in 79 cents. In the past, they've moved a whopping 55 cents. So extra juice from a Ford perspective. Not a ton of extra juice out there. You folks playing in Ford. Remember for a while there, it was a hot meme name. It seemed like everybody was piling into it. People were buying the 25, 30 call verticals and the 30 calls outright. They were hot and heady times. It seemed like a while ago now. Let's go out to Meta. And how much call paper and money did we see go to die on that upside call wing in Ford, listeners? Oh, we chronicled a lot of it back on oddities late last year, but still, ton of money went to die out there. Meta, let's see how much money is going to die or perhaps live out there. 26th after the bell, 130 even is where it was trading when we ran these numbers. The stock was pricing in $15.40. That's a fair amount of juice because in the past they've moved $10.28. Obviously, there's a lot of question marks still hanging over Meta, this newly announced very expensive VR console, which seems to be where they're putting all their eggs these days. Of course, the lingering impact of what's going on with Apple, kind of curtailing a lot of their ad revenue on mobile platforms. A lot to unpack there. Southwest, 27th before the bell, $33.10 is where they were trading. They're pricing in about $1.60. In the past, they've moved 101. So fair amount of extra juice for Southwest as well. And the aforementioned Mickey D's, how dare they drop hints of canceling the McRib? They bring it back just to get rid of it. First, they kill breakfast, or all-day breakfast, I should say. And now they're going to kill the McRib. How dare they? 27th before the bell, $254.50. They're pricing in $7.50. In the past, they moved $4.86. That's a heck of a lot of juice. Clearly, the word has gotten out about the cancellation of the McRib, and folks are not happy about it. I say we march after the show. They're right down the street here from the studio, their corporate headquarters. Let's march down the street, pitchforks in hand, and give them a piece of our mind over there in Mickey D's HQ. 27th after the bell, also got the Fruit Company. 147.25 is where they were trading. In the past, they've moved $7. And right now they're pricing in $5.18. So nearly $2 worth of extra juice in Apple. Is it warranted? Interesting. I'm going to have to dig into that a little bit more out there. When we ran these numbers, their 30-day vol was right about a 40, 39.90. And if you take out the earnings juice, so they're saying only earnings juice, only adding about 5 points to that. That seems low. Amazon, 27th after the bell as well. 119 and about a third is where they were trading. They're pricing in 8 and about a third. In the past, they've moved about $7.50. So a little bit of extra juice in the Amazonians, but nowhere near as much as what we're seeing out there in Apple. Is that also warranted, listener? Should Apple have more earnings juice right now than the Amazonians? I'm curious. Hit us up. Let us know. In terms of the earnings season, starting to look rock'em sock'em, listeners. 114% so far for week one. Again, we've only had 74 names reporting. So take these numbers with a pretty hefty grain of salt. Week two, 219%. Spoiler alert, it's not going to hang out there. By the way, we have a great question of the week. We'll get to it in a little bit about this exact topic in terms of how things are hanging out there right now. Looks like earnings trades. We are still monitoring 47 long straddles and 32 long calendars for your earnings trading pleasure. As we keep on rolling, it is time, listeners, to go on into the odd block.
It's time to break down the most interesting, unusual, and downright questionable options activity that's been identified by theoptionsinsider.com. It's time for The Odd Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to The Odd Block, the portion of the show where we get weird, we get wild, we get a little whimsical sometimes as well. You know us. We can be crazy out there. Speaking of crazy, let's get some new names here on the old list of oddities. First, let's go out to everyone's favorite, HDFC Bank Limited. Ticker symbol HDB. This is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Housing Development Finance Corporation, headquartered in Mumbai. So there you go, listeners. Let's see. On the year, a year ago, was trading $76.68. And then it kind of had a rough first half of the year. Got down to about its low for the year, $50.60. That was on May 9th. Then it had a nice little resurgence. September 14th got up to about $67.80 again. Then it kind of gave up a lot of that, back down to about 57 and change. And it's kind of been bouncing in this high 50s to low 60s range ever since. Hanging out right now, $60 and about a half, up about a quarter on the day. Let's see what our Eye of Sauron found out here today, and everyone's new favorite, HDB. It's like someone maybe drawing a bit of a line in the sand at the 55 strike. Someone coming in and blasting away at 5,928 of the Nove 55 puts. So roughly $5 out of the money puts, listeners. Getting 62 cents for these bad boys. That is a 39.2 volatility. If you are intrigued, let's see. The stock was about half a buck lower, $60 pretty much exactly. So they're looking better on the stock already. And let's see if there are any earnings. Not in this cycle. The next earnings announcement is on January 14th. So they must have just come out with earnings recently, because they're not due to report again for a while. Mr. Meatball, this seems to be a little bit of some post earnings, taking advantage of perhaps thinking this thing is going to languish here for a little while. And if it drops below the 55 handle, they don't mind picking some up, sir. What say you?
Yeah, and that's funny. This is the second huge trade on an Indian bank involving like cheaper out of the money put sales. So makes sense to me. Certainly traders making a bet, putting a line in the sand out there. Definitely makes some sense.
What was your other Indian bank that came across your radar?
Icky Bank.
Everyone's favorite. Icky.
Yes. So Icky, it looks like somebody sold, what was it? I'll tell you in 1 second. Was ICIC? Yeah, IBN. In IBN, a trader, which is Icky Bank, a trader sold looks like 17,000 of the Nove 20s at 7 cents.
Coincidence? I think not, sir. What do you think?
No, I do not think so.
Someone wants themselves. Good.
Wants themselves some Icky Bank.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, 17,000 of them for 7 cents. Listen, that's not a heck of a lot of juice of the Nove 20
puts. It is the opposite of corn. It does not have the juice. No juice
at all, listeners. So yes, probably not coincidental that some folks are coming in to draw sizable lines in the sand in similar entities. When you see this kind of thing, if it looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. So tell you what, maybe we'll put these in our to be watched category as well. So we will have a double dose of Indian financial put love, or put sales, I should say. There we go. All right. We'll keep an eye on both of these. There we go. So we know we come back to both of these, and we'll see, listeners. We'll see. You like the Nove double puts for 62 cents, or do you like the Nove 20 puts for 7 cents? Which one is your preferred trade? Hit us up. Let us know. As we keep on rolling, a name that has been making some headlines of late. I said we come back to it, and we are. This is everyone's favorite name. This is Snap. Maybe least favorite. I don't know. They took a big drubbing recently, listeners, off quite a bit. They're actually rallying today about 4% at 30 cents, trading over $8 again. This is a Snap, of course, on the year. A year ago, they were trading $54.50. So a wee bit north of where they are right now. And it's been mostly a series of tragedies for them throughout the rest of the year, slowly moving down. Then they have some big aggressive moves down. And a couple of moments where they tried to dig out of the hole, but nothing really sustainable. It's pretty much been just one big downtrend. And of course, you all know what happened recently. They sold off another 30-odd%. They got as low as $7.33. So they are above that now. They're hanging out close to the $8 range. So that's something, at least you could say. And saw some interesting prints out there today. A lot of prints. I mentioned a ton of paper out there in Snap. So we could probably spend the rest of the show just parsing all of the paper out there. But one caught our eye, Mr. Meatball. It's somebody coming in this morning and scooping 15,264 of the November expiring on the 4th. So these are weeklies, just going out in 10 days. 6 half puts and paying 8 cents for these things. So they were lifting the offer. The stock was a little bit north. It was $8.14 when this trade went up. Obviously, there are no earnings in this cycle because they just announced their earnings. So this looks like someone, Mr. Meatball, is panicking the heck out and saying, you know what, I'm gonna pick up a whole bunch, 15,264 of the Nove 6 half puts expiring on the 4th. That's how they're concerned. They are not even going out to the monthly. They're going into the weeklies. 6.5, obviously about $1.50 below where the stock is trading right now, listeners. Mr. Meatball, what say you, sir? A lot of near-term concern for Snap.
Yeah, we've been seeing there's kind of paper both ways in Snap.
There are some call prints too.
Extremely busy. But yes, near dated puts, kind of the same type of action that we've seen in like Charge Point and Laser. But on the bull side, we had a pretty substantial March 10-16 call spread go up. We saw some regular Nove call buying floating around out there. But what I will say is that early in the day, Snap was up about 60 cents. It's now up 20. So certainly the momentum stocks do not look strong today.
Yes, we profiled some upside trades in Snap last week, listeners. So flipping the script a little bit, some near-dated cheapy puts on the docket. You like those 6.5 puts for 8 cents? Get while the getting's good. Let's get on out to a name we talked about back on the show almost a month ago, back on September 26th. This was Axle, a.k.a. American Axle and Manufacturing Holdings, Inc., out of Detroit. Talk about a red-blooded American name. Company called Axle out of Detroit. They make drivetrains, listeners. It's about as red-blooded as it gets. Axle, well, I won't tell you where they're trading right now just yet. A bit of a spoiler. At the time, we profiled, give you a bit of the hit of the history first, and then we'll come back to it. A year ago, it was trading about 10.25, this stock. It's kind of bounced around quite a bit. Got as low as 636. That was back on April 7th. Then they rallied to about 931 on June 9th. Then they rallied again to their high for the year of $11.96 on August 16th. So remember, we were all in rally ho mode in the market. Listeners, this name rallied hard too. And then it sold off just as hard. Got back down to 683 on September 30th. And then I'll leave it from there because we'll get into our trade here. And back on September 26th, we profiled someone coming in and drawing a bit of a line in the sand in good old Axle, coming in and saying, you know what? I'm going to sell 3,700 of these October 7 puts. Remember, I said the stock was close to $7 at that time. And they got 35 cents for these, right on the bid. They weren't messing around. They just hit the bid. The 66 vol, the stock was actually $7.30 when they put these up. And there were no earnings in this cycle. The next announcement is in November 4th. And looks like as going into expiration, these puts were still open. And the stock was trading $7.66. Even though it flirted with a little bit of downside. They got down to about 683. That was about 4 or 5 days after this trade. And that was pretty much the low that the stock hit. So I wouldn't even say really had to sweat it. They got down to their strike a little bit. And then the stock rallied and never really looked back. It closed at $7.70. These puts were still open. So it seems like they ended up pocketing about $1.30 for their efforts, Mr. Meatball. What say you?
It's what it looks like. Nice, made $1.30. I mean, not the worst, right?
Not the worst at all. They had to sweat a little bit, but not a ton. It's no fun if you sell premium and you just skate through. You got to sweat a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
It sounds convincing, he says. All right, as we keep on rolling, it is time to unleash the beast that is Uncle Mike. It is time for the strategy block.
It's time to dispense options, wit, wisdom, and education. It's time for the strategy block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the strategy block, the portion of the show where we break down some options, tip, or technique or strategy and explain how you can utilize it in your own portfolio. Uncle Mike, sir, what do you have in store for us today?
So I want to talk a little bit about Alibaba, not because I like Alibaba or it's just the great name or anything like that. My compliance department typically doesn't like me talking about individual stocks, but I just want to illustrate something with which I've done with it and talk about what is SKEW and how does it actually exist? Why does it exist? And what the heck is it? So with that being said, first off, what is SKEW? SKEW is when there's some type of option pricing that just you look at it and you're like, well, wait a second, this doesn't quite seem right. So in other words, one thing that you'll find if you look at SPX options, and this started back in 1987 after the great crash in October of 87, what you'll see on there is puts are priced higher than calls. Well, why is that? In theory, if the stock has an equal chance of going up or down, how come puts are priced higher than calls? And there's different expirations and different strike prices are priced in different ways. Typically, more out of the money puts are at a higher price than deep in the money calls. So, but why is that? Well, the reason is that in the SPX world, there's so much demand for catastrophe puts that the price of them goes higher. And that's something that creates SKEW. Now, SKEW can happen in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different stocks or futures for that matter. Another example is silver. Something that I talk about a lot on the show is my silver reverse SKEW and doing my collars on there where calls are priced higher than puts. Now, the reason for that is that typically when something bad happens, although we have gone through quite a few bad things in the last couple of years, but a lot of times stocks go down very quickly and commodities rise very quickly in theory. Now, has that happened the last 2 years? It's kind of been a bizarre world the last couple of years, but that's another story. But the point is that within silver, for example, you can do collars and you can create a favorable collar by using this reverse SKEW. Now, because Alibaba is kind of on the brain today with everything that's happening, I want to tell you about just one client and one situation that I have somebody in, and that is in Alibaba. So for the client, they wanted to be in something conservative. So of course, the first thing that I thought of was Alibaba. I'm saying that facetiously. And so from there, what we did with Alibaba, it was set up to where we wanted to have something boring for the client, something to diversify instead of just all bond holdings. And I've been doing this for a long time in terms of how I've set things up with this, but something to not just be all fixed income or not all cash or whatever, but something to where you could get a little bit of a rate of return over time. Now, keep in mind, this was also, we set this up back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth, when interest rates were close to zero, meaning like back in December. And so where we were set, Alibaba was trading at roughly 110. And we were able to do, going out to January of 2024, do a 110 only underlying, buy the 110 puts in January 2024 and sell the 120 calls. And from there, we were able to do it at a slight credit. So in other words, I'm just looking at the basis of this trade. The cost basis, the price of the stock was $112.41. We sold the call for $29.82, and then we bought the put for $27.66. So essentially what we did is we have the potential to earn $10 of upside with zero risk. Now, the advantage of that, of course, is that Alibaba is getting the royal crap kicked out of it right now, and it's down in value. And so we gave the client the opportunity to make between $0 and $10 over the course of 2 years, or close to 10%. So by doing that, and keep in mind, this is back when the 10-year note was below 2% and interest rates didn't exist at the time. But by doing that, what we were able to do is create something to where we have the potential to get a low risk trade, or in this case, from a monetary standpoint, a no risk trade, and have the potential for close to a 10% rate of return over the course of a couple years. That happened because there are so much more demand, or at least at the time, there was so much more demand for calls on Alibaba than there are puts. And so by setting things like that up, we have our little mini SKEW fund that we have, to where we're trying to take advantage of stocks that have a reasonable belief that they could go up over the next couple of years. If they go down, then it doesn't hurt us any, except for that we could have had the money in fixed income, but in reality, if we put the money in fixed income, then the value of the fixed income instruments would have gone down. So this is something to where it's really, from a monetary standpoint, a no-risk trade. Now, once again, these things don't happen all the time, but they do exist and they are out there and they are available because of that magic word, SKEW. What is SKEW again? It's when there's a greater demand for calls than there are puts, or a greater demand for puts than there are calls, and you can create trades like that. They're not extremely exciting, but they can be extremely safe. And for the purpose of holding Alibaba, it's arguably the safest holding in my entire portfolio due to the put option that's in place. And that is the Uncle Mike definition of SKEW. Stay tuned to my Twitter account. I'll be releasing a video on what is SKEW sometime either tomorrow or later this week.
All right, it's time for us to keep on rolling and go really quickly into the mail block.
It's time to take your seat on the All-Star panel as we read your emails, tweets, Facebook messages, website comments, and much more. It's time for the mail block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the mail block, the portion of the show where you guys ask questions. We also turn the spotlight back on you with our questions of the week. Let's pay off last week's question really quickly here. First, last week we asked you folks, hey, recession is usually defined as 2 quarters of negative GDP growth. Everyone seems skittish to ring that recession bell, so we thought we'd put the question out to you guys. Quite simply, is our economy in a recession right now? Gave you 3 answers. Heck yes, heck no, and we need a new definition. 75.9% of you said, heck yes, we are in a recession. 17.2% saying we need a new definition. I might see some argument for that because clearly no one seems to be behind the one we currently have, which seems pretty clear. We should be in a recession technically right now. And then heck no, 6.9%. So intriguing stuff. Obviously, the overwhelming majority of you folks thinking we are in a recession, going by that old textbook definition of the word. Getting out to this week, remember I said earlier in the earnings report, listeners will have an interesting question along those lines. And we do. This week, we're asking you, since the start of the pandemic, every earnings season has only delivered, on average, about 85% of the movement that was priced into their straddles at the start of the season. So we thought we'd put the question to you folks. What is your outlook for this earnings season in terms of how much movement are we going to see? Is it going to be somewhere about the same, somewhere in that 85 to maybe 90% ballpark? Or you think it's going to be more than 100%, so we're going to see more movement than what was priced in by the straddles, a.k.a. it's going to be a rock'em sock'em robot cycle, a lot of action, a lot of intensity, a lot of fun. Or you think it's going to go the other way? You're going to think it's maybe below 80%, not really a heck of a lot of movement, kind of boring, and a bit of a snoozer. Let's go out to the greasiest of meatballs, sir. What is your vote for what we'll see from an earnings season this cycle? And then B, more importantly, what do you think our audience is voting for?
I think earnings are going to be soft. And it'll be interesting. I think that we're really coming up on like the most important couple of days, right, with Apple. And I'm guessing what's the worst option that out of the 4?
Below 80%. So kind of
I'm going to say below 80%.
Oh, you think our audience is going there too?
Yes.
Ooh, a twofer for a boring snooze fest of a season. Uncle Mike, are you down with that, or are you going to disagree, sir?
I don't disagree with Mark Sebastian when it comes to earnings announcements. So I will agree with Seabass because earnings really aren't my thing.
Except when you're loading up on the Baba, baby. All the Baba for Uncle Mike.
There you go.
And let's see what you folks have on the brain so far. Again, this just went live right before showtime, so it hasn't even been live an hour. But in the early voting, we have 42.9%, a weird number, choosing things are going to be about the same, 85, somewhere in the 85 to 90% range. Remember, listeners, if everything is 100%, that means we moved exactly as much as was priced into all the straddles at the outset of the cycle. More than 100% is obviously more movement, more action, more stuff to sink our teeth into. Below 80%, I'm not sure if you've ever had a below 80% side. That'd be pretty quiet. That's the pretty boring sector. And actually, our other two extreme votes are tied, 28.6% each for north of 100%. So looking for an action-packed cycle. And the Meatball and Uncle Mike vote, which is pretty boring, also at 28.6%. This is over there at Options is the place to go to find this poll question, listeners, as we keep going around the block.
It's time to tell you what we'll be watching on our trading screens until the next episode. It's time for Around the Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to Around the Block, the portion of the show where we tell you what we're keeping an eye on until our next session. Apparently, there is some impending announcement from the Justice Department coming any minute now as well. They're going to make an announcement about some important national security case that they're working on. So perhaps that could have some impact here involving a state actor. So who knows what that could involve, but people have guesses are flying fast and furious, as you might imagine. We'll all find out, I should say, pretty soon exactly what they're talking about. By the time you hear this, we should know. But let's go around the horn. Let's go to the Uncles and Mikes first. Mr. Uncle Mike, sir, what are you keeping an eye on until our next episode?
Of course, earnings. Tis the season. Just watching them, not really trading them, but definitely watching them. Also watching the 3,800 level on the S&P and also watching to see if we can make more lows in the bond market. That is what I'm looking at.
And Mr. Meatball, same question for you, sir. What do you keep an eye on over there in the land of the pit until our next show?
Yeah, bonds, corporate. I'm really interested in kind of corporates and mortgage backs and what happens there. Does the Fed come out and say something around pivoting or not? We also have a ton of earnings over the next couple of days that I'm keeping a tight eye on. And that is kind of it. So just kind of watching the market and trying to figure out exactly what we're going to do here.
Well, I know what we're going to do, listeners. That music means we're coming to the end here on the old OB. But don't worry. If you need more in your lives, we'll be back in a little bit with the crypto rundown to break down all the madness in the Uncle Mike's favorite markets. The crypto markets should be fun. Stay tuned for that. If you listen to live, you'll get that in your ear holes in a little bit. If you listen after the fact, just hit next. And, of course, coming back at you tomorrow, great pro Q&A with the one and only Mr. Tony Saliba. Got questions for him. Get them in now. Of course, if you want to join that pro Q&A, listen in and submit your own questions. TheOptionsInsider.com/pro is the place to go to learn more. Let's go around the horn. Mr. Uncle Mike, sir, if folks want to reach out to you, see what you have cooking, where should they go? What should they do?
Follow me on Twitter at Mike TOSAW, TOSAW, as I try to release as much videos and content as I possibly can. And if you're looking for a financial advisor, please check out my website, stcharleswealth.com, and you can get in touch with me that way.
There you go. And Mr. Meatball, sir, same question for you. I heard a rumor you got a book, sir. Tell us about the book again.
Yeah, so Trading Options for Edge, second edition. We added 3 chapters. Biggest complaint we've got was that the charts on the old one were black and white and they couldn't read them. The book is full cover. It is full color. It is hardcover. We've gone through with a fine-tooth comb and really improved it, updated it, and made it, I think, maybe the best thing I've ever written. So go to Amazon or go to DeGroyers.com and buy my book, give it a read, and leave a positive review if you like it. And if you don't like it, just don't say anything.
Just keep it to yourself. There you go. Find it for yourself, listeners. Trading Options for Edge over there on the Amazonians right now. You can pick it up. It's also a Kindle version you can get as well if you prefer that. Check it out for yourselves. We got to get on out of here. Back again, like I said, for the crypto rundown a little bit. Back again tomorrow for all you pro folks. Great pro Q&A with Tony Saliba. Wednesday, double dose of Options Bootcamp and Options Playbook Radio. And then Thursday, back at you. Another episode of the Option Bowl. Stay safe out there, everybody.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.